Welcome back to some more Material UI. Last time we handled the form fields on the edit page for our application, for our fantastical bestiary. Now we're going to go ahead and take a look at the attributes and habitats section, and we're going to use a special component down here to get this to work, and then something else to get this new add form field working as well. So what I want to do is show you the new component that we're going to add here to make this work. So we're going to use something called a chip. Now the chip is really helpful because it's just a nice little way to display out data, and we also get this little delete feature here, which is totally something that we want to be able to do on these. So that's what we're going to take a look at. I'm probably going to wrap the whole thing in a paper to give them a nice section between them, and let's go ahead and take a look. So first off, we know that we're going to have chip. I know that I want paper in here, so I'm going to import chip, and I'm going to import paper. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap the sections in paper. Now, right here I'm on the, apologies, I am on the edit page. I don't want these on my edit page. I want them on the individual components. So if we come down here on the edit page, scroll down to where those different sections are, we can see we've got our different sections right here. We've got attributes and habitats. So here I really want to use what I've got for my stuff inside of the creature habitats and creature attributes components. We can still see we have some lingering vertical spacing here, which we were using box for. So let's go ahead and transition these to box, and we'll do the margin bottom on these of 3. And then we want to open up our two components, so our attribute, creature attributes, and then creature habitat. Now, creature attributes and creature habitat handles both the editable and the non-editable, or just the display version. So on display, I want my chip to not have the delete. But on editable, I want it to have the delete. So that's something I'm going to have to take care of. But what I'm going to look at is the last 2 items in here for my chip to see how those are working. So it's got an on delete here, and then it's passing a special icon, but we don't need the icon. The one that we're trying to replicate is this one. Now it's got a color of primary on it, and the label that's actually the verbiage that shows up inside of the chip. So label shows up in here, and the fact that we have an on delete makes this show up. So that's what we're looking to do here. Let's come over to our component. We're going to start in attribute. We'll wrap up attribute, and then we'll worry about our creature habitat. So what we want first is we want to import paper and chip. First, I'm going to use paper, and I'm going to wrap everything in paper. So I'm going to make this outermost wrapping element our paper wrapping element, and then I need to change the closing tag as well. So I've got paper here, and I've got the opening paper up here. So I've got paper wrapping the whole thing. Now what I want is my chips. Now right now I have them displayed in a UL. And I've got this special class of blocks on it, but the chips technically could get displayed without that. The other thing that I might want is a box here, but we've got the gutter bottom, so we're going to let that just slide as that. And I'm going to add box in here, and I'm going to make my UL into box. So we're going to bring in box, and we'll change the UL to box. And I'm going to delete the blocks class, and then change the closing to box as well. Now, for the rest of these, I want these to be chips. So this section prints out all of our list items or our different attributes. So this is what I want to be Chip. So I'm going to make the li Chip. Now I don't technically need a closing because this is going to be self-closing, as we saw with our other chips, but we need to get all of the right attributes. So remember, label had our verbiage in it, and our verbiage is a dynamic value. It's this item. So I'm going to remove item now. And then we have something that's conditionally rendering whether or not we have the edit button, which actually we're going to want that here too, because we want our chip to be conditionally rendered whether or not we have the edit. Now, for edit, we need onDelete. Now, there's a special way that I could do this. I could add in all of my, so I've got a const, well, we're going to do let, because I'm going to have to adjust this, and I'm going to say chip props. I'm going to create an object with the props needed. So I'm going to say key is index, and then I've got label with my item, and then we're going to have onDelete with this function here. Now I should be able to delete the rest of this. Now, question becomes, okay, well, great, I've got this onDelete, and I've got these props here, but how do I use this on here? I'm going to show you a little trick. We can use the spread operator here to take all of the contents of this and make them props on our chip. Then later on, we're going to do an if statement that double checks whether or not this is going to be editable. So save, and we're going to test it out by taking a look at what we've got. Alright, so we've got chips with deletes. Now I'm not going to delete it just yet because I want to make sure everything's working before I've got anything else to put in here. Also, we'll notice that paper actually doesn't have any padding around here, so we're going to have to add some sort of padding at some point. But not right now. Right now we want to make sure that our chips get in place. Now for my chip, I want maybe some sort of spacing between them, right? Like that would be nice. But realistically, I'm just concerned with whether or not I've got the right thing going on here. I want these to be color primary, so I'm going to put color primary in here. Now down here, I want my conditional statement. So if editable, because that's what we were using before, and that's what's being used down here to add the add button. Now the add button is being added as an li, which it's no longer an li. So I'm going to remove the li, and it's just going to be the button. But now I need this to change what's getting put in for chips. So in chips we have all of these properties, but it really changes down here, right? So I'm going to switch this around. I'm going to say, okay, well, if editable is true, I absolutely want to have dot on delete equal our delete, and I want it to be color primary. Otherwise, we won't have those two values. So let's come back over to our page. We've got primary color with our deletes and color primary, right? Again, no padding around here, but we're going to get there. Now, I want to check my details page to see how this looks now on details. So back to details, scroll down, and we can see that we actually have the items without our delete, and they're just gray, right? They're not the blue color that we have on edit. Now, we can decide whether or not we actually like that, right? Maybe we don't want the blue on only edit. Maybe we also want the blue on the other one, right, on our details. Or we just want it to be gray. So I'm actually going to have it be the primary color on both. So now, if we look, we have blue on edit, and if I go back to details, we have the blue on details. We don't have the delete anymore, which is good. If I go over to edit, I should be able to hit the delete here and get the item removed. Now, if we look at our log, we should see what happened. Right, we hit delete and delete creature. Now delete creature is not really hooked up, but we saw that it fired off, right? So we're good there. Like, we can call that good. Delete's not 100% hooked up on our application as of right now. That's a topic I'm going to save for a little bit later. But for right now, it fires off everything, so we're good. Like, if I were to refresh this page, and we come down here to Fang, and I hit the delete, we can see that delete creature attribute has fired off. Right? So everything comes back, we're good to go. And it's setting an attribute, we just don't have any kind of delete hooked up on the server. That's what we don't have hooked up here. So if we come back, we still have the Fang in here. Right? So we're going to be taking a look at that on another video. But right now, we want to concern ourselves with this area. Now, we have the padding issue, right? Like, how do we add padding? Plus, we want to make sure that this works the same on Habitat. So once we've got attribute fully looking 100% here, we're going to go ahead and make sure that it works the 100% over on Habitat as well. But we have this as well, add, and then we have an add form, right? How are we going to handle that? Now what I'd like to do is take it so that when I click add, this comes up as a modal. And then that modal has a select a new one, and then it adds it in. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at here with the add. But we also want some spacing. So let's take a look at paper and see if paper allows us any kind of spacing. As far as chip goes, like, chip's pretty good. Like, we're looking good here. Now this classes .root. This is some kind of custom styling, and we'll talk about this custom styling when we get to styling stuff. But first, we just want to be concerned that we've got our items in here, they're working. We could have them spread with some space in between if we did some sort of styling on the container, but we're going to leave that for another discussion here in a little bit. Right now, we want to see if paper allows us any kind of padding adjustments. So let's take a look at paper. And we're going to go down to API. We're going to see what props we have. So we have variants, elevation, outlined, square, elevation, component, classes, children. Right? Nothing that says anything about any kind of padding. Now, you might say, well, Myron, we've seen padding on the papers that you've used here. I actually have another custom component that has the padding inside here. So that's totally not paper doing that, that's me doing that. What we could potentially do is there's a padding attribute that we can see if we can add to this. Material UI has some what are called utility attributes. These are attributes that can be used across many different things. The one we saw on Box was margin. Now, the one that we might be able to use on paper is padding. So we're going to hope that it has padding, and we want padding equals, and let's say 3 all the way around, because we've been using the 3 for most everything. So we're going to go over to edit, and it did not work, right? So we don't get to use padding on this. We could potentially look for, if I look up margin, we might see the utility here. Yeah, props margin. This is the input label though. Oh, it's got a specific margin attribute. That's not what we want. Let's go to box and see if there's a link to it from box. So here, box is using the M1. It doesn't look like they have an individual link to it. Let me see if I can just look up M. Oh, utilities. Yeah, here they are. So margin, P for padding. Right, these are the utilities I was talking about. And it looks like most of them are on box. So if the thing is on box and we can have it to box, we can totally add a box inside of our paper. And I'm just going to fix my indentation. And box is going to get the P3 instead of paper. So we get our spacing. Now the P3 is maybe a little extensive. I probably only need 2 or 1. Yeah, 2 is very nice, right? That's a nice level of spacing around there. So box, I can use my margin and padding utilities to totally tweak how my margin and padding is working. Now we want to concern ourselves with this add, and then we want to replicate that on habitats. So let's go ahead and look at the add and see how we use some sort of notification system. So like I said, I want to look for modal. Modal's the other thing that does like a pop-up. Now we've got a couple different pop-ups here. I'm going to go through a couple of them so that we can see what's going on. I'll just search for it. So here's modal, and if we use modal, we're going to get this nice large box like right in the middle. Now there are some other ones which I think we've got as like, yeah, see modals here. I think Popover and Popper are other ones that we can use. This is the popper, right? It sort of comes up like a small little toggled menu, which is maybe not what we want. Then we have the Popover, which that comes right over the content, which that's not too bad, right? Here's Popover, and here's interface so that we can change how it's happening. So this says top. Let's try center. Right, so it goes from the center. Bottom goes from the bottom. And then if we do transform origin, let's say center, right? Center. That's kind of what we're looking at. So we have lots of options here, but we can say however it is that we want it to act. But popovers, I think, probably our best bet. I like how it works here, and this is totally just me saying like, oh, I like this, right? So popover is not bad. I think the modals maybe a little too much. I don't really need like a full window. We only have a single drop down and a button to go ahead and add the item. So let's go ahead and use popover. But first, always commit. So what we're looking for in the popover area is we click this add attribute, and we want to have this whole thing come in. Right? So this is our button for clicking, and we want this to be button, obviously. Like it's got to be our button component from material. So we want to bring in button, and then we'll change this to button. And then variant, we want to change to contained. I can't remember if it's contain or contained with a D. Let's check out button. Contained with a D. Okay. So we've got button contained here. We'll do button with variant contained here as well, but we're also going to set color to primary and change this to capital B button. So this will look like a button from material, the other one's going to look like a button from material, and we're going to want to use the select down here. Now we'll reference the select that we used for the type when we do that, but that's totally what we want this to look like down here. So we've got this button here, we've got this here, but we want all of this button content to be inside of our popover. So let's go ahead and take a look at our popover. So we've got popover, and then we want to change these attributes. So let's do popover and see what we get. So popover, come over here, and the popover, we actually want to look at the full example. So where's our full code example? So here's the popover and full code example. So here's the button, here's the popover, right? That's what we're looking for. So popover is going to go ahead and be just its own component here with a whole bunch of attributes and then some content. So we want popover to be here. I think it's 2 P's popover. Nope, 1 P. Shame. And did we import? We did not import. So popover. Got popover down here, but I need it to be closing as well. There we go. So we've got closing of popover. We've got popover up here, and then we need the state. So we've got an open here, and that's the Boolean. So it looks like we're not going to need this conditional because popover is already handling that. So we're going to say open, and we're going to pass it the this.state.is adding. And we're going to take off our conditional here and see if that was correct. That conditional is just for conditional rendering. So we were manually taking care of it, but popover seems to have its own solution for it. And then it's got an anchor element, it's got an on-close, and it's got a couple other things. So we're going to want to take care of the on-close for sure. We're going to see what the anchor element is. Looks like our anchor element is a bit of state getting used here. This is a functional hook. We're in a class-based component here, so let's use the class-based version, which is fine. It doesn't matter if you're using a functional component or not. That's just your own personal choice. I've got class-based components in here because I'm later going to use this to show some changing over to functional components. But this is class-based components, and I wanted to show that we could use this same documentation over here on material that shows it in a functional component and do it in a class-based way. It doesn't really matter which one you're using because you can do everything that Material UI does in either version of the component. So use whichever one you want, just know that you're going to have to make the decisions as to how you're going to use it. So here I've got anchor origin and I've got transform origin, which are some properties that we're going to have to add in. We saw that when we saw this example down here, right? And it had a whole bunch of them that it was just sort of swapping around, and we had a whole bunch that we could use here. And that's what we see here, anchor origin dot vertical. That's anchor origin dot vertical, and then we've got anchor origin dot horizontal, anchor origin dot horizontal, right, and then transform origin, all of that. So these are properties that we're going to add in here. So this is anchor element, this is anchor position, right? Anchor position does it somewhere else. All right, so let's go ahead and we're just going to test it to see if the open is working. So our add button looks like a button, right? It's not primary color. We could switch it to primary if we wanted to. Let's go ahead and do, we've got color primary on the add. Let's do color primary here. So we've got color primary here. Is it too much blue? Who's to say? Maybe we change these out to the gray. Let's see what that looks like, right? Because that's what we're doing. We're trying to decide how we want the whole thing to look and how we want it to feel. So I'm going to take off the primary from the chips. And we've just got the gray. I actually kind of like the gray with the blue button. That's a nice look. So we'll keep it that way for now. And let's see, we wanted to test the add, so click add, and okay, so we get some issues here, probably because we haven't added all of the different types. So specifically, it's giving us a message that we haven't used the anchor element, which is totally true. We haven't. We're just sort of going at it right now, trying to figure out what we want to add. So let's figure out the rest of that. So I'm going to come over here to the documentation. We're going to come up to this code example here. We want to use an anchor element, right? Because it's telling us stuff about anchor element. Now, if we didn't want anchor element, we could say anchor reference, anchor position here. So we could potentially use that, right? So let's see what this looks like with anchor position, and then we'll try out anchor element if we don't like anchor position. That's a lot of what using these style libraries is. Try it out, see if you like it. If you don't like how it looks or how it feels, then you change it. Now, I'm going to automatically add in these other two positions here. I'm just going to copy them, paste them over. Probably need the anchor position here too, since we have anchor position. So I'm going to do that. Just copy all of them, bring them over, and then we'll adjust them as needed. Now, oh, I already had anchor position in here. So we've got all of this in here. Now let's go ahead and give it a test with our open. So test shows up right in the center. Not bad. Our button went away because we had that set up before so that our button actually goes away when we add it in. If we wanted to continue to do that, we can. We don't necessarily have to. I think I like it with the anchor element so that it stays down here. So let's try it with the anchor element. You can see that we've got some find DOM node is deprecated in strict mode. So we could potentially turn strict mode off, or we would have to figure out about the find DOM node. So what I'm thinking is we're not going to use this. We're going to use the anchor element. So let's switch it over to anchor element. Now this is the anchor element, but let's see what it looks like over here in the code. So we have anchor element, and then we've got up here, we've got state that is the anchor element. Now, in our click, we make the current target of the button the anchor element. So let's give that a shot. I'm going to come over to my code, and I'm going to create onState. So anytime you see in the Material UI documentation, you see syntax that looks like this, this is a hook. So in a functional component, these are hooks. This represents the value on your state if you were working with a class-based component, and this is set state. But this is specifically set state for only this state or this hook. So that's how this works. We can just go ahead and create this on the fly with our state and our class-based component. So I'm going to come up here where my state is, and I'm going to say anchor element, and we're going to set this to null because their original had it set to null. I know this because if I come over yonder, I can see that it has react.useState, and that's the default null. So now on the click of my button, of this add button, so let's see what we have here. Button, right? This is our add. When we click it, we're going to toggle add. So let's go over to toggle add, see what we have. So toggle add, we want to be able to set state, but we want to add this new one. So we want to add anchor element, and the anchor element that we want to add is our event, which I don't have that in there right now, but I'll type it in. And we have event.current target is what they were using. And current target is the thing that's been interacted with, so the thing that we've clicked. You can see they're using current target here. And that's going to set our anchor element. And then on close, they have it not set the anchor element. Now they've got two explicit ones, right? An open and a close. I've only got a toggle, so we're going to make this work with the toggle. So now if we come back over to the attribute, now on the toggle, we're going to have to switch these around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a ternary operator here, and I'm going to say, well, if this dot state dot is adding is true, then I want this to be null. If it's false, it's going to toggle it over to be the current element. And these ones are already set up to do the toggling that's needed. So we've got that piece, but now we need to come down to our popover and we need to look for anchor element needs to be set to anchor element. Now I copied that, and if I come in, I take off the anchor position stuff and I put in anchor element, it's going to have anchor element, but ours is on state, so I need this dot state dot anchor element. So it's got state and then on close. Now I should be able to use my toggle. So I'm going to copy this attribute and I'm going to move it over so that when I do my close, I'm actually going to call to the toggle. So this dot toggle add. So we've got toggle add, and then we've got the other two properties down here, which we haven't adjusted yet because we're not sure if we want to adjust it. And let's take a look. So here we've got it click and thing comes up, but it doesn't seem to be targeting our element because we've totally gotten rid of our element. So let's keep our element on the page. Right? So this conditional rendering is removing the element if we've clicked it. So we will just make sure that we have it. Oh, actually I do need to keep that in there a little bit. I just need to remove this portion, which is checking to see if add has been clicked, but I need the editable because this shows up on the details as well. So I only want it to show up if editable is available. So I've got my button, add, there it is. Now I'm getting some warnings over here, probably some deprecated, certainly some deprecated features in strict mode. I'm going to go ahead and turn off strict mode because this is just a big pain in the butt. So I'm going to come over, and the way I turn off strict mode is I go to my index.js and I remove react.strict mode. Alright, so I removed strict mode, and now, there we go. I don't get my warning, but I have my form and everything. Now, form's not beautiful, right? Like, not by a long shot, but if I come and I click anywhere outside here, come back, and my add button's perfectly alright. So I've got that, it'll come up, and I can add. So I'm going to adjust the styling on that so it looks a little bit cleaner, but we're going to come over and we're going to look at adding the select and making sure that our button's okay. Now, I want to adjust the button a little bit because I want my button to be small. Right? I want it to be a little insignificant. It doesn't have to be super large. So we're going to come down, and there's a sizing feature that I'll show you here. Here's our sizing feature. We've got a small, medium, and large. Small, medium, large in all versions. So if we open this up, we can look at the attribute that's being used, and it's size. We pass it either the string of small, medium, or large. Now, by default, they're usually in medium. So we want it to be small, so we want this size small attribute. So we'll come over to our attribute, and on our button, we want to do size small, and then I'm going to put it on the other button as well, that is our submit. And I'm going to take off the class, because we don't really need the class anymore. All of the styling is being handled through Material UI, which is exactly the way we want it. So if I come back over here, you can see that the small's a little bit cleaner when we're talking about having it in line with our chips. So small, and there we go. Let's swap out the select, and then we'll be rocking and rolling. Now, I'm not going to worry too much about the box around here, because this is going to get into some custom styling. What I mean by custom styling is a subject that we're going to get into later, but just to touch on it briefly, it's going to be us adding some additional styles for the interior of the component. Now, we could do a little bit without custom stuff. We could potentially add box in here. So let's just put box in, and I'll show you what I'm talking about, as in we could just add box. So I could add box wrapping this whole thing. Now this is the select content along with the button. And we'll correct the indentation. And then box going to get padding all the way around it. It's going to be a 2. And then if I come back over and we test it out, you can see it's got the padding all the way around it, right? So that's what I mean, like we could use box and it at least looks a little bit better. But one of the things that I like over here is when we're clicking on the thing, we've got this darker box, right? So we're going to do a little bit of customized styling that's going to give us some darker look to it. But for now, we're going to totally leave it with just the box and the padding on it. And actually, let's make the padding 1. We'll make it even less obtrusive. Yeah, there we go. Now we want to make this select look like the select that we're using over here in this. So we're going to use that outline select as our base. But first, I'm going to do git add dot, and then we'll make our commit. Alright, so we've got our popover, we need our select. So we're going to bring open where we used select before, and that was on the type editor. Now here on type editor, we've got all of these. We need form control, input label, select, and menu item. Alright, so I can pull those all off of the same import that we have here, and copy them, paste them over into our import over here. then we have access to all of them. Now, the other thing that I need to do is pull over how this was used down here. So I'm going to pull over everything that we used here all the way through the form controller. Now, we're absolutely going to have to make some adjustments when we bring it over, but this is where we're going to start. So here's the select as we're using it now, and we want to replace it with the other select that I'm just pasting in here. And our label is not type, right? We're in attributes, so my label is going to be attribute, and it's going to say select an attribute, and it's going to be attribute. Now, this.state.selectedType, that's not accurate, so I can't have that. Now, I don't actually have a value set on this one. I do have the onChange, so I need this onChange instead of the one that we copy and pasted over. I also need to tab this in a little bit more. So the onChange is going to be this onChange. We're not going to have an associated value. The label is not going to be type, but it's going to be this attribute, right? So attribute, and we're going to say attribute select label, and then I need to change this stuff here to match what we're using here. So we're using all attributes from props.store. So all attributes is now being used here, and then I need tag, not label, on the other part. So tag, item.tag. So now we should be able to get rid of the select here, and we should be good. So let's go ahead and delete it, cross our fingers, and make sure that, and hope that we got everything. So I'll come over, now it refreshes my page, and I hit my add, I've got my select attribute, and it's got all my attributes. Everything's looking pretty good. We'll select something like claw, and hit add, but it looks like it's giving us a warning. Warning, a component is changing an uncontrolled input of type undefined to be controlled. Oh, sure. So here, I think this is because of our onChange. So onChange new attribute type. Yeah. Let's just make sure that that's correct. So handle change selection. No, it's using the ID there, so that's good. We already had that. We're changing something else in state. Is adding anchor. Anchor's predefined. New attribute ID is predefined. We'll have to look at it again when it comes up. But we are looking good on everything else. Now, we could potentially come here and maybe switch this around a little bit because there's not space enough down here. Again, we could use box for something like that, right, and give it a little bit of margin on the bottom. So we could use box with margin bottom, and set that to 2, and put the closing box at the end of form control, between form control and our button. Perfect. Yep, now there's a little bit of space. Grab our attributes. Right, now it's giving us that error again, right? But this is just a warning. It's not breaking our code, but we could write better code. So it's saying a component is changing an uncontrolled input of type undefined to be controlled. Input elements should not switch from uncontrolled to controlled. Okay, so we probably need to add value in here. I think that's what it's talking about. So if I hit add on here, we still work, right? Like everything works, but we've got that warning. We also have this warning here, Material UI, you have provided an out of range value undefined for the select component. So basically, it just wants us to have value on here. And we can set our value equal to this dot state dot, and then it's going to be the new attribute ID. That'll get rid of all those. Right, we didn't get the yellow warning, and once I click this, we don't get the red warning either. So we're good there. Everything is working here. So we're good. We've got the whole thing. All we have to do is now replicate this on habitats. So let's go ahead and replicate it on habitats. I'm not going to talk through this. I'm just going to kind of replicate it. You can watch the code go, and then at the end, we'll make an examination and check out all of it all together. So first, before we start that, git add and commit. Alright, so now all we have to do is do that for habitat. So I'm going to close some of this down. I'm going to come over here to habitat, and we're going to want to replicate a lot of what we have going on here over on habitat. So let's get that working and see what we've got. I'm going to copy some of what I've got from over here. It's going to go over there. So let's start with our imports, and then we'll work our way from there. Now that we're back, we've got both attributes and habitats now very consistent on both our edit page and our details page. So that's all I wanted to go over. What we've seen here, a couple components we've already seen, paper, box, and button we used, but we introduced two new ones. We introduced the chip and we introduced the popover. So please feel free to give these things a shot, because we really only understand them when we're giving them a shot ourselves. But these are how to use a couple more of the components here that Material UI has to offer. Thank you, and I'll see you again for our next chat.